Hi, and welcome to Widow Talk, real conversations about the stuff people just don't talk about. I'm Karen Stapleton, and today we are talking to Jane Phillips. Hi, Jane.
Hi, Karen.
Jane was married to her beautiful husband, Paul, and they have 4 children. Paul passed away suddenly and unexpectedly in 2012, and Jane was left to chart her and her family's way through grief. Today we'll be talking about being widowed with children and how we can help our children through grief. So we'd like to welcome Jane to this conversation today.
Thanks, Karen.
Jane, tell me a bit about your life with Paul and the kids.
We were married just short of 14 years, and when Paul passed away, and we had 4 children, 2 boys, 2 girls, and they were aged 5, 8, 10 and 13 when Paul passed away very suddenly and unexpectedly. Paul was a very hands-on dad, especially with we did have very traditional roles. He did the boys' football and I did the girls' dancing. So when he died, it was my role changed and the children's lives changed, not having their father figure in their lives and involved in their activities.
Yeah. So when Paul passed away suddenly, we know it's a complete shock and turns our worlds upside down. How did you and the kids get through those early days of grief?
The early days are very much a blur. Obviously, a lot of support came in from family and friends. My mum from the UK flew over with my sister straight away and supported me. Obviously, work friends of Paul's, they all gathered around me in those days and supported me. And the children. It was very much a blur. In retrospect, looking back, it was very much a blur what went on. The children, we tried to, especially the younger ones, tried to keep things as normal as we could. The day after Paul passed away, someone took the kids all to the movies to see Hotel Transylvania, just so we could start dealing with the practicalities of someone dying and what needed to be done with regards, funerals and identifying Paul and things like that.
Yeah. So there's really tricky early days. With the kids being a range of ages, did that make it hard to have different conversations with each of them? And how did you make that work?
Definitely. My youngest was 5, she was in prep and she didn't really understand the concept of what had happened. She knew that everybody was sad that daddy was dead, but what that ultimately meant for her meant something very different for my teenage son, who had a very close relationship with his dad. And someone told him, "Oh, you're the man of the house now," and tried to put that responsibility on him. And I said, "No, you're not. She's still a child. You don't have any responsibilities except to be a good role model for your siblings and help me in that way." But like you said, dealing with the children at different ages is more complex. My 8-year-old son asked me, what happens at the funeral and what cremated means, and that's a very difficult conversation to have with an 8-year-old, whereas the older children are a little bit more aware, a little bit more understanding of those sort of things, even if they haven't experienced it in their lives.
Yeah. I've got 4 combination of children as well. My experience was that my kids approach grief very differently. Was that the same for yours?
Definitely. My eldest daughter, who was 10 at the time, it didn't appear to affect her. She was still going out with her friends, and I had a friend's mum ring me saying, "Ariane's rang her friend and said her dad's dead. Is this some sort of joke?" Or so she was being very upfront and blunt, and I think part of that was the shock still with what was going on. We even went 2 weeks after Paul died. We'd planned a trip to Townsville, we're in Cairns to watch a football match, and we'd got the tickets. I still loaded the kids in the car and we went down and we did that. And in retrospect, I don't know how I did that. You know, it's very much autopilot.
Yeah.
But I think the main thing for me was try to keep things as normal as possible for the kids in such an abnormal time. Paul passed away in the September school holidays. So when school resumed, I sent all the children back to school. Obviously, the schools were aware of our circumstances and were very understanding and accommodating. But I felt it was important to try and keep a level of normality in their lives, even though their lives were not normal by any stretch of the imagination, just to try and keep things consistent. School were very understanding and made allowances for various things that the children needed and what I needed too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you spoke a bit about the schools and sending the kids back to school. Were they, what were some of the external resources you used? And obviously the school was quite important within some of that because of the ages of the children as well.
For sure. My eldest son was at high school and the other three were still at primary.
Yeah.
The high school my son was at the time, I didn't find quite as supportive as the primary school. And eventually I did move him to a different school where he did receive a lot more support through the school counsellor. My children also saw the school counsellor at primary school and had assistance that way. In retrospect, I wish I'd sought more assistance for my children. I think as they've got older, and I probably didn't have the understanding at the time that I do now, it probably affected them more than I realised because they were so young and they do adapt. And people say children are resilient and they adapt to their circumstances, which is true, but it still doesn't mean they don't need that little bit of extra support and assistance to get them through. And looking back now, I wish I had sourced more support for them at that time or a few months after when things had settled down a little bit and, you know, you come off other people's radar. It's been a few months. People are, you know, we try to keep everything as normal as possible so it appears like everything is normal.
Yeah.
But I think my children could have benefited from more support at that time, and you know that was something I would recommend to people. Maybe not straight away, but you know within a few months or even a year, look at what supports your children might need at that point.
It's a tough one, isn't it? Because I know for me, one of my kids, we got support for her down the track, and I'd offered all of that for my kids early on, but they didn't want it. And so it's that fine line sometimes, isn't it, in terms of, you know, listening and doing what they want, but at the same time having to make these parental decisions by ourselves and what do we push, what do we hold back on. So I think it's a really tricky one, particularly if they're resistant to that. So yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a mental health clinician, and I think that I thought that maybe I could manage what was going on with my children, but again, you're a little bit too close to home, and you know you're going through the same experiences as your children, and you're managing your own grief as well as managing your children's grief. You do tend to put your own a little bit on the back burner, so you can support your children.
Yeah.
You know, and that's not a bad thing, but then again that grief can come and hit you a little bit later if that's what you do. It's my experience.
So you just said that one of the things that you do, and I think we're all guilty of this when we've got kids, is that we do put them first and not necessarily recognise and support ourselves. At what point did you know and realise that you had to do even just some little things for yourself to support your own grief as much as you were giving everything to the kids?
I think it took me quite a long time, Karen, to get to that point. I did put the children first, and I didn't spoil them in that respect, but I considered their feelings and their needs more than mine.
Yeah.
I felt quite guilty in that I still had both my parents and they didn't. I
Okay.
felt so terribly sad for them that I was their only parent. Not that I'm not a good parent, but, and I also felt very sad for me that I was their only parent. I was very angry with Paul for leaving me with these 4 young children that I had to do everything for. I was always the soft parent. Paul was the strict parent, which you generally get in a family. And I had to learn to be be stricter, set firmer boundaries and follow through on those boundaries, which was something I found. I could set the boundaries, but following through on them was what I found difficult. I was too soft. But, I did harden up. But yeah, it took many years for me to put myself and find myself something to do, that I enjoyed, and, not necessarily put the children second, but also consider my own needs.
Yeah. It is that it's not about putting you above them, but it's about I think at times we also have to look after ourselves to regenerate, and refresh ourselves, and that makes us a better parent when we take that little
Right.
bit of time for ourselves. And it can be something very small. It doesn't have to be that go off and find yourself for 6 months, but it's just taking that time for you.
Yeah, just
Um,
for me, it came out more spending time with friends. I was working. I still do work 4 days a week, and that extra day in the week I had off when the kids were at school stopped just being the day that I did the cooking, the shopping, the cleaning, the beds. I might go and get a pedicure, or go and have a coffee with a friend, or do something that pampers me a little bit,
yeah,
rather than just focus solely on the house and the children and
yeah,
making sure everything was running smoothly.
beautiful. One of the things also is the first, and the firsts are hard for all of us, but how did you navigate through all those hard firsts with the kids and their ages, obviously, as well? Again, that combination of ages. How did you work your way through that?
I very much involved them in everything that we did, took their opinions. We had little meetings where we'd decide what would happen. The first Christmas was 3 months after Paul had passed away, and we went to my dad's place. He lives locally, and he organised Christmas, and we basically just turned up, and we still weren't in the right space, mentally, I think, to deal with a Christmas at that point.
Mm,
And then it came shortly after Christmas. It was Paul's birthday in January. And then, of course, the first anniversary of Paul's death. But again, I involved all the children. What did Dad like to do? And that's what we did. We looked at things that Paul liked to do, things he enjoyed, places he liked to go, even the pub that he liked. We went for tea that night. We went to the mini golf course. Paul was a mad golfer. We, went to the beach. We did things that Paul enjoyed. And we listened to his music in the car. Not the music we liked, but we listened to it because it reminded us of the good times with Paul. And I think it's very important to, consider what the children want. The younger ones tended to go along with the older ones, were led by them, and that's fine because they were just so very young still to make those choices.
mm,
But it was agreed as a family how we would mark those anniversaries.
yeah.
And I think always the anticipation of the day is actually a lot worse than the day itself.
Mm,
And that was almost like a dread coming up to that day. But once it arrived and passed, it was a relief.
yeah. Um, what were some of the hardest things that you faced with the kids' grief? I know that you said for you it was trying to be a better parent, or a different type of parent to what you had been in the past. Was there anything else that you found hard with either one child in particular or just across the board?
My youngest child she was 5 at the time, she became very clingy. She's 13 now and she's still very clingy. She slept in my bed for years, didn't want to let me out of her sight, didn't want to mix with friends, go on sleepovers, go on play dates, birthday parties, nothing. So that was quite difficult to manage that. I've just forgot your question, Karen.
And
Sorry.
what was the hardest thing? So you said it was, so the hardest things that you had to face with the kids' grief.
Yeah, and I think my daughter, who was 10 at the time, just turned in 11 the next month. One of the things she said to me was, "Who'll walk me down the aisle when I get married, Mum?" And that's not something you imagine a 10-year-old girl to even think about. Yeah. But obviously she was projecting into the future that, she was realising that this was it. Dad had gone and there was nobody there anymore to replace, well, not even to replace him, but in that role. Yeah. I did tell her she had 2 older brothers who would love to give her away to anybody. Yeah. My eldest son was close to his dad. He was 13 at the time, and he did football. Paul actually coached his football team, so that was really difficult for him. The football club that we were involved with were very supportive, and they even did a medal, a memorial trophy for the boys to pick who they wanted to give it to, and they picked the most improved player on the team and gave that to them. So that was beautiful at the presentation night at the local footy club, that the boys got to do that in memory of their dad. But yeah, I think Paul missing their sport, and as they've got older, things like learning to drive, having the first beer at the pub, just those milestones that the children get as they age, it's, they do feel the loss of him. Out the back of our house, we have a pole that over the years we marked our heights on, and Mum and Dad are on there, me and Paul's on there, and the kids, throughout the ages, and the boys are well taller than Paul ever was, and that we've had the house painted a couple of times, but that's the only place that I refuse to have painted that Paul. It's bright orange and sticks out like a sore thumb, but it's very much part of our home. And, we still look at it and look how short Dad would be now. Oh, do you think I'd be able to, arm wrestle Dad? And, we talk about Paul now in a more, we reminisce about what life would be like if he was here. Or we think about, would the boys be able to arm wrestle him? My eldest son, who's nearly 21, would I be able to drink Dad under the table? That's the sort of that's the sort of things they think about now. At the time when Paul passed away, those sort of things were never, a consideration. But as time moves on and grief changes, they are things that the boys and the girls can think about.
Yeah. So it's keeping those memories alive, and also in a way that, resonates with the kids, and I think giving them permission to have those conversations is really important as well. So I think it's great that you have a bright orange height marker in your backyard. I think that's beautiful and fabulous. I really do.
Oh, it's horrendous looking, but hey, it's never going.
That's it. Absolutely, you cannot get rid of that now, of course. And the kids would be devastated if you did, because it's such an important connection for them. So I totally understand that.
And Paul's writing is on there where he's written the kids' names and things like that. So it's still a connection. I don't make out Paul like to be a saint to the children, and I never have. Yeah. And we do talk about the things that he did wrong and the times he got cranky with the kids. But now it's, we laugh about it. And do you remember the time, Lucas rode his bike into the gutter and smashed the gutter in, and he just threw the bike down and ran because he was terrified of getting in trouble from Dad, because Dad was the one who disciplined. Yeah. But yeah, we laugh about things like that and talk about the bad times as well as the good times. Paul wasn't a saint, and the kids can't think of him as that, or else I'd always be, I'd never match up as a parent, but so yeah, we do talk about, the things that weren't so good about Paul as well as the things that were good.
Yeah, but I think that whole grief changing over time, we see that, and I think it's nice and good that we can see in the kids as well that happens. And
for sure.
Not only do we get better at carrying it forward, but it softens and ebbs and flows for them as well. And absolutely talking about the good times and the funny times and the bad times is you keeping Paul, the whole of Paul, alive, not just
real, keeping him
yeah,
real, not
keeping it
just as an
real.
ideal, but
Yeah.
yeah. You know, one of the other things that I've found with the children as they've got older and they meet new people who didn't know them at the time when, you know, when Paul died, is they find it quite difficult to tell people that their dad's dead.
Yeah.
And they will not pretend that he's alive, but, you know, it's not something that, oh, you know, what does, you know, something about your dad, or by the way, I'm Marianne, and by the way, my dad's dead. It's not something that, you know, you introduce. But as time goes on, then people would ask about their dad. They found it quite difficult to, because it made other people feel uncomfortable. That's why they found it difficult to say what had happened.
Yeah.
But, you know, we've talked about that and how to broach that. And when people say, oh, I'm sorry, you know, just, yes, that's okay, and move on. I said, you don't have to have a big conversation about how dad died and what happened. And, you know, you just say, oh, you know, I lost my dad when I was such an age, and move on from that. So I think, you know, it's harder for them to, you know, when they start, the younger ones started high school and they meet people, and even in the teachers, you know, make sure that the teachers are aware of those things as well.
Looking back, Jane, is there anything that you would do differently?
Probably everything. If I knew then what I know now, probably a lot and probably nothing. It's very instinctive how you behave, I think, when something like this happens. Again, my biggest aim was to protect my children, both, you know, very much emotionally, from what was going on around them. But I think be a bit kinder to myself, take a bit more time for myself, look at professional counselling for the children, if not immediately, at some point in the future, if they're willing to go with that. But, you know, definitely just being kind to yourself and not putting such great expectations on myself of how I needed to parent these children.
Yeah.
They're 13. How old are they now? Gosh, I can't remember. 20, 18, 16 and 13 now. The older three are turning a year older in the next couple of months.
Yeah.
But they've all turned out to be pretty decent kids, doing well in life, and they're very empathetic to other people. And I've had friends locally. I had a good friend whose husband passed away, and they had children. And my eldest son said, "I'll talk to the kids' mum, so that they know, you know, I can help them. I can talk to those kids and help them." So I said, that's really nice of you. So, you know, like I think they've grown into empathetic, well-rounded people, even though they've gone through such a hard time, and it did mature them a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Matured them.
That's beautiful. I love that story about Ethan reaching out to other children. That's just a beautiful thing to do. And I agree. I think after let's just say it's traumatic, you know, losing a parent. You can't put it any other way, no matter what the circumstances of that loss is. So for them to come out on the other side and it to build their compassion and kindness and empathy, I think you've done a wonderful job, Jane. So I don't think you need to be so hard on yourself at all.
Not always.
So you mentioned all the things you do differently. Is there any other advice that you would give any other young widows who are helping their kids get through the loss of their parent?
Yeah, I would say take all the support you can. If people offer to help, don't be afraid to accept it. If people don't offer to help, don't be afraid to ask for it. Because I think that's something that we don't do as widows. We don't ask for help.
Yeah.
People offer and say, "Oh, call me if you need anything," and you feel that, you know, you might be imposing if you do that. But I do think that people are more willing to help than we realise if we reach out. So don't forget to ask for help as well as take whatever's given, and be kind to yourself. And, you know, your children, as I said, mine were very young, age 5 to 13, and one point I thought my life was just so hard looking after these children, but now they're so much older and life changes, and you know, as I said, they're good kids and life gets easier. They get older, it gets easier. It gets harder too, but it gets harder in a different way.
In a different way, yeah.
You worry about them coming home from nightclubs and things like that, but
instead of
you
missing
know,
potty training.
yeah, that's right. And you know, you're not as, you know, they're capable of doing their own laundry, cooking their own food, and you don't have to do those, you know, jobs that you do when they're very young. It's a
Yeah,
different sort of stress, I
stress.
suppose, when they're older.
Well, Jane, that's wonderful advice you've given, and thank you so much for sharing your story and also the experiences and feelings that you and the kids had gone through with the loss of Paul. It's really wonderful to see the 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 beautiful life that you're living now, and the kids moving forward in their own way, and you are too. So that's just fantastic, and I know that that will give help and support to other people out there who are facing this, you know, similar circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, Paul's still very much a part of our life. He's just not with us.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of putting it. I would like to wish you and the kids every happiness into the future, and I'm sure that it's going to be a wonderful adventure as you move forward. I'd just like to, for everyone who's been watching today, please check out our website, firstlight.org.au, for other resources as to that you might be able to access, or also if you are looking for resources that will help someone who you know has been widowed, check out our website where you'll find more of these videos, and also our YouTube channel as well for more real talk, widow talk videos. You can reach out at any time, and sharing our stories is a way that we hope can help you as well. Thanks, Jane, and thanks everyone for watching. See ya. Bye.
Thanks, Karen. Bye.
Bye.